Hi there. Good evening, everybody. Foil Sharov Galer. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. And this is Fireside Chat 22. So, Eimear Burke here, and it is brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So just type in your name and let me know where you're from. So there's Vivian from Oklahoma. Lovely, welcome. Skegness, Florida. Ellie from Kent. Mike, Cindy from Virginia, East Yorkshire, Cork, Marcella, West Yorkshire, Gunter and Al from Switzerland. Lovely to see you. And somebody from snowy Montreal, Edinburgh, Slough, Belgium. That's Ava from Belgium. Wonderful. And Inez Rose from France. And Stephanie from Utah, Colorado. Lots from the US. Kentucky. Wonderful. Chicago. And Trisha Burke, I don't know if you're Irish, but you're from the Netherlands. That's wonderful. And Pennsylvania. Jane from High River. Wonderful. And Blake. Wonderful. New Hampshire. Anyway, let me introduce you to this evening's guest. And this evening we are going to California. And I want to welcome Frank. You have a long name, Frank. I know you as Frank Martinez, but it's Frank C Martinez.
Frank Charles Martinez IV, or Francisco, if you want to call me that, or IV or fourth or something like that. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, just tell us where you are. I love the name of your place. It's Eureka. I just think it's an amazing name. So tell us.
I'm in Eureka, California. It's on the north coast of California, almost to Oregon, and we're smack dab in the middle of the redwoods of the Sequoia sempervirens, not the inner coast, the inner redwoods, but the coastal redwoods. We're right between. To the south of us is Humboldt Redwood State Park, and to the north of us is Redwoods National Park. And then there's redwoods all over the place in town and around town. So we have trees, lots of trees.
So you're a tree man, and is there a difference between your redwoods? You said you're coastal redwoods, and they're different to the others. What's the difference?
Okay, well, there's three different kinds of redwoods. There's Metasequoia, which are Chinese, and they are deciduous. They lose their leaves, and and then there's the redwoods in the center of California, and they are wide, enormous. And the tall ones, the coastal redwoods, Sequoia sempervirens, are the ones around here, and they're the tallest ones. They're the giants, and they live 2,000 years. They get 300 plus feet in height. And it's just an amazing place to commune with them. They have very low voices. They're very slow, even more than other trees, and they are amazing. They really are amazing.
So it's the other group, the middle group, that the roadway goes through. Am I right?
No, we have drive-through trees here too.
Oh,
it's the redwoods have a very thick bark, and they're very fire resistant. So it's very common for you to see a redwood with a hole in the middle, right? Called a goat pen, right? So if you cut a hole for a car to go through, they just go, "Oh, that hurt. Okay, well, let's go on with our lives." And so you see, we had one of my favorite places to go is Big Basin, which is down south of San Francisco, and there was a tree there that had it's called the Mother of the Grove, and it had a goat pen in it. It was the inside on the bottom part was burned out, and it's fairly common. And they showed one of them. I think it was her. They were showing their designation of her, and then of it's her. And they showed it, and the fire had started again inside, and it went out. And so we didn't lose as many coastal redwoods as in recent fires as we did in the center, the central part of California, where we lost Mariposa Grove, which is famous, lost about 18, 20 redwoods.
And it's really interesting. I'm going to come back to you on that, but I just have to say that there is a giant redwood. Now, it's giant by Irish standards. I know everything in America is bigger. But we in the forest, in the woods that I go to regularly, there is one stump, a dead one, and then there's one living one with the soft, spongy bark. And of course, it'd be very soft and spongy here in Ireland for some strange reason with all the rain we have. But there is one growing near me, you know. So
that's wonderful. I saw a recent video of a forest in New Zealand where they had planted a bunch of redwoods, and they were like, oh, they're 200 feet tall and 100 years old, and I'm like, okay, it's babies, but they're really nice. I like them. I was like, I have to visit those.
Actually, I was in New Zealand 2 years ago for the Southern Hemisphere Gathering Assembly, and it was absolutely amazing. I mean, they have incredible native trees there. I mean, they have a number of European ones, but the native trees are just magical. So if you can, and if we're allowed, someday I'd recommend.
Oh, yes.
I want to back to your landscape again, because you mentioned something about the trees. They have, you said they have a low voice, or they speak in a low voice. Just expand on that, because I find that fascinating.
Well, you can feel their communication. It's very slow. It's very low. They're like, look at those things down there. Oh, they're running around again. You know, they're very wise. They've been here for a while. You know, when you get that, when you get a little bit of a wisdom when you've been around for a while, and they have been. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we have about 5% of the trees we originally had before before Europeans got to California, but they range all the way from Monterey on the coast, Big Sur, all the way up to slightly into Oregon. And when you drive through them or when you walk through them, you can feel their presence, and they have a tendency. You know, if a redwood is shooting seeds out, seeds are, the little tiny, it's a cedar, little tiny cones. 1 in a million of those, not very much, gets actually germinated and grows, but they also tend to send up shoots, right? So you get trees that have fallen, and they're they're genetically identical. Their genetic children will be growing on top of them, will be growing where they used to be. It's fairly common to have what's called a cathedral tree, where you have a bunch of daughter trees that have formed a ring or a semi-ring, and the central tree is no longer there. And but genetically, that's still the same tree.
We have the same. I haven't seen it, but I've read about it. Probably in Britain. I don't think we have it in Ireland. The same with yew trees.
Mm-hmm.
So the center. So because the branches layer,
mm-hmm.
you end up with those daughter trees, and it looks like and it's the same.
Yeah. And so yew trees are also ancient trees. Redwoods are ancient trees. They're marvelous. Exactly. And so you can hear them. You can hear them thinking. You know, they tend to be very contemplative. Sometimes they're quite humorous.
Well, there's a question from Tara McCormick here. How many years did it take to learn how to hear the redwoods? And I don't know if that's an easy question or if that is a difficult question.
Actually, my family has been camping. We went to the redwoods when I was 8, my family's been camping and being in the wilderness since, well, before I was born. My parents met and fell in love in Yosemite. So I've always heard trees. The first couple times I went to the Redwood, came to the Redwoods. I used to live in Redding, which is in the center of California, just basically about 180 miles east of here. And the first couple times I didn't, it was oh, these are lovely, but it was after a couple trips with listening carefully and I was talking, actually at the time I was talking to a friend of mine and on the phone and I could hear them, kind of expressing themselves saying, that's interesting. What an interesting looking little thing that is down there. And interest, you're curious about us. Oh, well, it was a very slow, very thoughtful communication. So I'd say they're pretty quick about. They have a lot of presence, and if you spend a few concentrated days in them, you can perhaps hear them relatively quickly. They're very slow, but they're major. They're substantial.
So it's around spending time with them. Ben Stimson says maples are like that. You can hear them chattering to each other, especially around spring when their sap rises and it's time to tap. Wonderful. So, okay, there's another question here. This is you are the tree man. Do you feel differences between redwoods and other trees?
Yes, I do. And it's interesting. I even feel differences between these redwoods and the central redwoods. I was after a Pantheacon about 6 years ago, and the group of us went up. I was actually Christopher Hughes was in that, and we went up to the central redwoods, and they felt different. They were less happy with humans.
Do you have any idea why? I mean, could you?
Well, they've been well. They're in smaller groves. There's fewer of them.
Okay.
The place where we went to what's called Calaveras Big Trees, and they were very mistreated there. Even though the gentleman kept the gentleman who started kept the area pristine, they peeled the bark, and the bark is that thick.
Yeah.
Peeled the bark off of these trees and then reassembled it in a traveling show. And they did it once with one of them, and that one they couldn't get the effect they wanted or whatever, and they made it into a dance floor. So they did what was called the mother of the grove in this grove in Calaveras. They did that, and her dead body is still there, her skeleton, and it was burnt. And the body was actually the reassembled bark was actually displayed in the Crystal Palace for a while back in the 1860s, 1880s, whenever that was. But my son went there. Actually, it was kind of funny. My son went there after I'd already come home, and it was very sorrowful feeling. But they were glad to have us there. My son and my daughter, my oldest son and my middle daughter went there in the wintertime when I suppose they were looking for rest. And they were basically told, okay, you can be here for one night, but, leave.
Okay.
And it snowed on them. It came down relatively quickly. And my son, who is not druidical, and he was like, yeah, we're going to leave because they're not happy. They're lovely, but they're not happy. They're, and typically redwoods, redwoods tend to drop rather large branches.
Okay.
And called widowmakers.
Oh, okay.
And so they are capable of killing humans, and have done so in history.
So, yes, I mean, a bit like beech trees do the same. They're called what's it? Beech drop. That never camp under a beech tree, because the branch can land on you. Okay, so you've been brought up in your own landscape, your home, where your parents met, etc. What was your first spiritual experience?
My first spiritual experience, actually was I was living in Reading, and I was in high school.
Okay.
And that I remember the one that, and I was living in Reading. I was in what was called Youth Conservation Corps, and we went at the end of our, it was summer, and we were working on, conservation stuff. It was in the middle of high school and stuff. And we went on a hike to the Trinity Alps, which are between here and Reading. They're west and north, and they are magnificent. And we were hiking in there, and I was a geeky kid. I still am geeky, but and I was tail end Charlie, and we came up, to a Paternoster Dam, where the glaciers had left rock, and then there was a lake behind it, and then another, and then another. Okay. And so the walls of the canyon rose to the right and to the left up. And I remember going, this is amazing. This is really amazing. I've had more personal spiritual experiences, but that was the one where I remember as first. It was junior year high school. So
wow.
And the Trinity Alps are unbelievable to look at. Unbelievable.
The Trinity Alps.
Yeah, they're called Trinity Alps. They're just, they're imitation Alps. They're not real Alps. But they're all glaciated, very tall mountains that run between here and, that are between here and like the Central Valley and Shasta and that kind of thing.
Okay, and how at what stage did you discover, when and how did you discover Druidry?
Oh, well, that's interesting. I've only been involved in Druidry by name for about 7-8 years.
Okay.
I was contacting a friend of mine. She ran the East Coast Gathering. Okay. I've known her since 1977. I was contacting a friend of mine, and I was talking to her. I sent her a letter, and then we got her phone number, and she said to call me, and then so we got hold of each other. And she called me back when I was in the Redwoods. She was the person I was talking to. And so I'm driving along talking, and I'm realizing that these trees, they're like talking to me, and they're affecting everyone in the car. They're noticeably, my kids are like, Dad, you're texting a girl. Dad, look at this. And so that was when she's a member of OBOD, and before I even got involved in this, she asked me, because she knows me, she said, would you like to come out and help with the East Coast Gathering? And I said, okay. And then I flew out, and by then, so that was March when I spoke to her. By July, I decided to become a member of OBOD. And I realized that while that was, a difference, something that happened to me, I'd always been involved in the wildlife and feeling the spiritualness of it. Since my parents, since we always went camping, we always went to Reading. And I think the major difference, I was going through the Guers, and I'm going through Guers, and I was trying to figure out which way was north. I had a little place behind where my dad lived, and because I'd gone to live with him because he's getting pretty old, and he died about 2 years ago, and so I had a little grove with a little volcanic rock in the center that was my fire, and I'd put a candle there, and I was like, I don't know which way north is, which way is not, get piece to the quarters, and I was confused, and then I said, well, Shasta's over that way, and I went, I can't see it, but I know it's there. And I said, yeah, Lassen's that way, and Shasta Bolly's that way. And I realized I knew where I was in the landscape, not by the names north, south, east, west, whatever, but by the mountains that I had known since high school, since I had walked around in between, and I could feel where they were, no matter where, so it's, I'd like stop somewhere and go, okay, where's Shasta? There. Lassen's there. And they, and it became, after I met Christopher, and we talked about land, sea, and sky. And I realized that these directions that I have that are now in part, realizing that my connection to the land is how I know where things are. That Mount Shasta for me is the mountain in the midst of the sky. Mount Lassen for me is the mountain of living fire. Shasta Bali, which is just a little tiny, 3, 4, 6,000 feet high, is the mountain on the path to the sea. From where I originally lived in Reading, and those are my guides. That they were the next thing that happened to me that really influenced my Druidry. So
I just love the idea that no matter where you are, I suppose in California, or
I get kind of lost on the East Coast.
Okay, but say in Oregon, it's a big enough state, that you're able to know where you are by your connection or your sensing of the mountains around you. I think that's really, really powerful.
Yes, occasionally I get lost. Down to San Francisco, I get lost. I kind of like, okay, oh, there's Diablo over there, Mount Diablo, which is a former volcano. Okay, yeah, but and that takes me a little orientation when I'm farther away. But that was my parents. We started going to Reading to Lake Shasta in the 60s, when my sister, she's going to be 6. That wouldn't be fair to tell her age. She's in the 60s when she was very young. We started going to Shasta Lake as a family to camp, and then in 1971 we moved, and it's always been home after that. It called to us. So yeah, if Druidry has been in my life for 6-8 years, but the land has been in my life for a lot longer.
And you seem to have had that wonderful synthesis of trees and mountains in terms of your landscape and your spirituality and your connection with them.
Yeah, trees, mountains, and now, and the lake, Shasta Lake, but then now recently, Crater Lake has been calling me. So
okay,
I've been there twice last year.
Okay, and Lisa Horn says, big mountain range that stretches from Mexico to Canada, volcanoes all the way. So you're at the northernmost, what did you say? You're at the, you're the northernmost, the high, no, explain to me.
Northwestern part of California, yes.
Okay. And yet your mom comes from Mexico.
My mom is from Guanajuato, a small town called La Cañada del Caracheo. My father is from LA. He's a pocho from Los Angeles, one of those guys that had drove the car, the car jumps up and down. That's my dad. His family is from Colima and Mexico City and various places, but also California. California and back to 1893 or so. So we're both. I'm on my mom's side. I'm first generation in the United States, and my dad's fourth, probably.
It's just really interesting looking at the geography. Just what Lisa said about this mountain range that goes from Mexico, linking you all the way up, and obviously you're stopping there. You're not going all the way up to Canada. I think it's a wonderful line of connection, from the land of your ancestors on your mother's side and half of your father's, or whatever the percentage is. But I think that's
my father's completely Mexican, but he's just like one of those guys who grew up not speaking Spanish.
Oh, okay.
And driving the cars, the cars that go up in the air and then they go down, and you've seen cruising. They were cruising. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Cultural difference here.
That's wonderful. And I don't know, this is probably a huge assumption. Do you come from a Roman Catholic background? Because I know most Irish people are. Do you say most?
Very much so. Catholic school, that kind of thing.
And is there anything from your Mexican heritage that you still use in conjunction with your liturgy?
Yes.
Would you like
my ofrenda is in the west back there. Ofrenda is an offering table, an altar to the ancestors. It's right now because my daughter and daughter-in-law are on the way home. There's a candle lit there so that the ancestors will be watching over them. My ofrenda is still there. I kind of made a change in my life when I entered college, and and I was kind of like a little different than I had, but I realized that Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is a very important Mexican thing politically and culturally, that I don't necessarily knew at the time. I didn't know whether she was what it was, because it wasn't the same relationship, because I wasn't Catholic anymore. But because she appeared, two things happened.
Okay.
The first was she appeared to a native, Don Diego, and therefore the Spaniards could not wipe them out because they were also humans. Okay, right? That's the first thing. That was from the Spanish side. We can't kill them because the lady showed up for them, right?
Wonderful.
The thing was, she showed up on a mountain called where the Aztec deity Tononcin appeared. Tononcin, and she's sometimes called Nuestra Señora de Tononcin. Tononcin, who was a mother deity, and because of that, the Aztecs accepted this worship, this new worship that was, forced upon them, and didn't get killed because the Spaniards couldn't kill them because, they did. I mean, they enslaved them. They treated them badly. But, legally in the colonial days in England, if you were a native, you weren't a human. But in Spanish territories, natives were humans. They didn't treat it any better, but then they didn't really treat the other Spaniards any better anyway. But that one event changed the history. If you want to, it caused them. So that's in my life. My daughter, who never was Catholic, several of my daughters, but my one middle daughter, who is also an OBOD member, Danielle. She always wanted a T-shirt with Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe on it, and so she feels that influence, way after my mom. It's a kind of a classical thing in Mexican families to take a statue of Mary and put it in a bathtub or something and put it outside, and have it there as a shrine. And so she is on, well, Dononcin is on my current shrine from Imolc.
So it's the Lady of Guadalupe, and then Dononcin, it's the same person, just a different name, yeah? Or
maybe, could be, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Same. It was the same location. It was the same location. The lady that showed to Juan Diego that they have a miracle that happened. There's a picture on his tilma, on his thing, on his dress, his clothing. Her image on there. She had native coloration and native features, and so probably the same, or probably the same person, of whatever kind of person she is, deity, spirit.
Well, it's really interesting. We have Bridget here, who's honored at Imolc. So she's a goddess and also a saint, and she has survived, from pre-Christian times. Whether, I don't know what time they became conflated, or if they were, anyway. But the point is that our pre-Christian ancestors honored Bridget, the goddess, the triple goddess, and then Christians have honored her as a saint. And now with Druidry and a lot of paganism, that people move between goddess and saint. Obviously, for some very devout Catholics, it's Saint Bridget. But for many people, I know from narratives, they call the goddess Bridget or saint. It's that interweaving of the two traditions, and it's a very, very powerful one. You say you put the statue in water. What's the significance of the water?
That was
Mary in
the
water.
way my mom did it. And a lot of people, and they'll put it either in a half bathtub on top, or they'll put a offering of flowers,
lovely
flowers or something like that. So it's also true that they do that. So,
beautiful.
I have water in front of Dononcin right now. So for Imolc, getting ready for the next for Albanil, but
So you are in California, and you are bringing in Mexican traditions, spiritual traditions, and you're linking these in with Imolc and Albanil and as a Druid. How do you, don't mind me using the word marry, but just for that, how do you blend them?
That's been a kind of a difficult thing for me, and it's taken me probably 4 years to do that. I think part of it is the realization that there are different ways of obtaining information. Sometimes listening to trees, sometimes receiving what some people might call direct inspiration, revelation words. Sometimes Awen inspiration, all those three, or more than just that, dreams and things, visions, that each one of those has a purpose, that each one of those, for instance, I don't use tarot, but my daughter does. I don't use tarot because, even though Christopher gave me that wonderful Celtic tarot of his, and I love it, put up the pictures, put up the cards. But my friends do. My friends of mine, some of the wild druids, this little group we have. And my daughter uses tarot, and my daughter-in-law, and to them that speaks to them, and then to me it's more visions or dreams or sometimes direct conversations. And so I think that's how getting those together, realizing the synchronicity that things happen together, works. an important part is recognizing the diversity of the situation, so that that I'm not, for instance, I'm on Wiyot land here. This is the land of the Wiyot, the Yurok, are north of me, and I don't presume to to use their deities or um, their ceremonies, things like that, but I do recognize them, and I do have, uh, I do have provable native heritage. We found out a really interesting way that really happened, but that is, that ties me to the land, and also knowing that these natives did a lot of communication. But the other thing is diversity and also willingness to be tolerant. That helps
Uh-huh.
quite a bit. So that it's not that I say, oh, I'm blindly going to follow something. Well, I'm not going to look, not going to look, but it's that I can say, all right, I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to put this here, okay, and I'm going to look at them both and say, how do these fit? And that they don't fit immediately, okay,
Mhm.
you know. Um,
So, of course, I think it's an ongoing process to make sense of any of these traditions. But why Druidry? I mean, you're in, California, Northwest California, and you're stretching over to Europe. And why, and this is not meant as an antagonistic question, I'm just curious as to why Druidry and why didn't you engage with the native people of where you're living now instead of going so far away east?
I think it's the circumstances in which I found myself.
Hey,
I encountered Druidry through my friend Lorraine,
yeah, yeah,
and then uh, uh, I was, when I was out there, I was a minion, a servant. I love service. Service is the best way in the world for me to have fun. And
yeah.
I picked up um, Dave and Carrie Lee at the airport for the first ECG. That Lorraine says, "Hey, so I want you to go to the airport, pick up Christopher, and then pick up the next day, pick up Dave and Carrie Lee, and bring them around, and then make sure they get fed and they get where they need to go and to the thing." And I was like, "This is interesting. They have some interesting things here that are really calling to me." Um, the nature's part of the spirituality, the nature based spirituality is really something. Um, and it's open, it's
Mhm.
it's outgoing, um, because of the really terrible things that have happened, and even here in Eureka, that to the natives, they're not very open to
Yeah, yeah.
strangers coming in, and uh, nor should they have to be. You know,
Indeed.
if I look out, if I look out that way, there's an island where there was a massacre uh, in the late 1800s, and then they
Okay.
took the survivors and marched them over here to a fort and put them in a stockade where a lot of more of them died. So, they don't have a need to share.
Yeah,
Um, but Druidry, I started connecting with the people. First, it was Dave and Carrie Lee and Lorraine and all the wonderful East Coast gathering family of people out there. And
uh-huh.
then I started connecting here, the group of people that went to, Christopher and Aaron, Connor and Thea and a couple other people, my friends down in San Francisco. And the funny thing is um, Aaron had developed a relationship with Caradwin, right?
Okay.
and had gone out to England and was brewing the Alwyn with, kind of the ADO thing they were doing. And my connection to them, my connection to the people is what has brought me to Druidry, But then I have these facts, these things, these spiritual feelings, these things in my, what's it, they call it, a unknown personal gnosis or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I have those, and those are true to me, and I test them. I have a degree in biology, and I'm a computer scientist guy, and I test them using a modified scientific method, and for me, they're true. And
Okay.
when something is true to me, I can't just go, well, it doesn't fit. And I have to say, well, that's true. I don't know how it fits, but it's true. And I may never understand the math, but the physics is true, that kind of thing.
So somebody, Maz Beard, said, it sounds like he didn't look to be a druid. Druidry found him.
It's definitely true.
I think that was like my experience. I never expected to be a druid, and just a book hopped out at me, and that's how it happened, But it's and that's lovely, is that, these, of course, there's no such thing as a coincidence, is there? You meet, first of all, you meet Dave, you meet Kerry, and your friends on the East Coast, and suddenly all of these things coincide, and given your already nature-based connection, it seems to, click. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went.
And I suppose this is the magic of the order for me, is, and I don't know if you know that the Irish word for druidry and magic is the same. It's druidh.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, that diversity, and how we as an order can hold, so many traditions, so many worldviews, and yet we look at the points of connection, that love of nature, that looking for patterns in nature. Just see Ellie Tallis has written auspicious coincidence. Absolutely. To be able to spot that, recognize it, and engage with it. And even though, like, knowing this is true, but not knowing why. And I think it's going with that. I think that's one of the strengths of the order, is that this space has been created for all of this to happen, like a big cauldron, and have, and all the diversities and all the differences, just add so much to the wealth and the richness of the cauldron. And who knows what comes out of that. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoyed Druidry. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
When has it supported you?
Oh, well, things have been tough here.
Go on.
My father died. Well, I was that was 2018, and I've been involved in going to ECG and had some, my friends, the Wild Druids, down in San Francisco, in the Oakland area. And so we had talked about going to a witch camp. There's a California witch camp. And I was going with my friend Thea. And she was another OBOD member. Aaron and Thea are both OBOD members. And I was on the way, it was an 8-day experience. And I was on the way to the camp. And the day before, I left, and my dad had a lot of leg pain, and I was like telling my sister, this is when I lived in Reading. I said, hey, do you want to cancel or something? Or she says, no, I got it. I said, okay, because and so I said, all right. So that was a Friday. On Saturday, we went to a restaurant. He was hurting. On Saturday, I got news that he had a stroke. Right. And I'm like, oh, wow. And then on Sunday, they had tested me for prostate cancer, right? And they'd done the test. And my brother is a doctor in Reading, and he was trying to get hold of me, but I was, traveling. And all my three daughters, he called my daughters, and they passed the information. They found out that I did have prostate cancer.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
And this was back 2018. And they called me, and they were all crying, and I succeeded in making all my daughters cry. and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry you got that information from my brother, but he was doing what he, what was good. And so it was the day before, the day before we went to the camp, and the next 8 days I spent in the redwoods, having nature experiences, having experiences with nature and with people who were magical. And I was Thea and I were the druids, and we taught them to do Peace of the Quarters.
Lovely.
And we did the directions in Spanish.
Lovely.
And so I came back, and I was like, Pa getting, and then me, and I came back from that, and I was very peaceful, and it was able to get to it. And then I had the radiation, and I was in the radiation, and I would lay down the radiation and meditate, and Sacred Grove time here in the big machine.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And then we had small things after that, like the car fire, which not the camp one. The campfire was a really bad one. The car fire was in Reading, and 4 of my 6 households, from my 6 family households, had to evacuate.
Oh my God.
We evacuated across the river. My dad had his stroke because of the fire. He basically didn't do, he was a lot hard. He came out of the recovery center a week before the fire, and then he had the fire. We had to move him, and so he died. But it was, and he was wanted to see my mom anyway. But then and then there's just been, California has been hit really hard.
Yeah.
And that has that, and then coming to the trees, coming to Eureka is something that we fell into. My son felt inspired to come out here as well. He came out here, did all the arrangements. When we went to see you at GCG, remember, Danielle and I drove out, and he took care of everything. He got the apartment, he got his place, he got his job, he got out here, and got it all arranged. We moved into this lovely flat, which is the only way I can describe it, because it's really flat. Second, and then he got sick, and he got a headache, and he lost his job.
Oh.
So he got us out here, and he still has migraines, serious migraines. But when on the weekends, we average about 2 local trips. Even with COVID, we're careful, because there's just trees. Occasionally, mostly trees. We can go 40 miles in either direction, and if we have to, because there's closer trees, closer redwoods, and that he gets sustenance, spiritual sustenance from our trips as well, not just me, and we all do. It keeps us going. We keep the balance because of that. So yes, it has made a big difference.
You speak so simply about it, because it is so simple, and yet in that simplicity is incredible power. I mean, the power to heal, to ease, to support, to ground you. And I suppose you're very fortunate to live so close to that, to have that resource, and particularly in the time of COVID.
Yeah.
But I appreciate so much living in a rural area here in Ireland that I can just go out and either in my garden or I can go to the woods nearby. It's just a life scent. Anyway, there's somebody, I invite you to look at the comments both on YouTube and Facebook afterwards. Someone has a question from Pajo is, Frank, is there a contact for the group? I live in the Reading area, would like to find out like-minded people. Thanks. So
I'd have to think about it because the group moved here. But there is a very, very cool heathen gentleman who I know who lives in Reading, and then there's I think he was a FODLA member who's up in Mount Shasta, so I have some contacts there I could probably give.
So how do you live your life when you think of your responsibility as a future ancestor?
Well, it's not something that presses on me as if I can't have fun with it, but I try and make sure that to my children, to my friends, to those people, I provide experiences of nature, with nature, with spirituality, and so that they have that. I do some writing, just journal writing, not serious writing. A little doggerel, excuse me, not poetry. They have that. I make silly videos of the trees and our trips, and my familiar Muggsy, who's asleep he's kind of depressed because his niece and his nephew, they're my daughter's familiars. They went home. They went back to Utah, and but I make silly videos where he's looking for fairies.
He's a cat, I take it.
He's a dog.
Oh, he's a dog.
He's a Chihuahua.
My brother, wow, yeah, lovely.
And he really is an intelligent dog, and he really does enjoy himself. So I make these silly videos, and work with my friends. Leave them with openings so that they can join me. This house, this flat, has room for many people. We can take probably 6, 8 people, 10 people if we had to. That I'm a gateway, like a gateway drug, I suppose, to the redwoods. And I also serve. That was when PantheaCon happened. When PantheaCon was happening, last year, I would invite and connect with people, with my friends and with my family. My son, who is not my youngest son, who is not, he's really just kind of a skeptical person. He and Alice, the daughter-in-law, was here. They came out and visited me. And when we were at PantheaCon, they had a great time. And so I give them those experiences. And what they do with them, that's my sister's Catholic, very Catholic, and she comes out here, and we go see the sea, and we go see the trees, and by giving them that, I bought my grandniece's staffs, walking sticks, but staff made of different kinds of wood, and let them connect. I have a propensity to understand staffs. I don't know why. And let them connect with the land through those. And so I hope to leave little traces of this love of land throughout the people I meet. And I'm not trying to be a wonderful or great person or important or have people. I'm more interested in just leaving those little traces in their lives. So
It's I think the power of service is incredible, and I know you call your altar your offrendo, but I speak Italian, so offrendo is to be offering, and it's like what you're mentioning there is you're offering keys to people who are free to take them up or not. And I think that's one of the magic things about Druidry, is that it's not a dogmatic, enforced worldview, but and in the order all the teachings are, this is something you might like. Here's something you might consider if it feels right for you, and you to do it or not to do it. And it seems that's what you're doing. And I think when we really want to offer something to others, it's there as, this is something you might like. I'm giving it to you openly, but there is no obligation. And
there's a big difference between, oh, let me teach you this stuff. Oh, let me teach you. I'm going to teach you. And saying, hey, so you wanna come out and go to the trees, and I know this trail, and it was kind of funny because my sister came out for this vacation, and we went to Fern Canyon, which was, there's no path right now. It's just a creek in the middle of this beautiful canyon with ferns, and she was like, "We're getting wet." We're all getting wet, and then after a while, she's like, "Yeah, this is really cool." And the girls, her granddaughters, were up in the trail, and my son was up. They're further along, and we're like standing there going, "This is marvelous." Like, it's marvelous. And that it has to be service. It has to come from you have to be willing to. You don't have to be willing to tear out your heart and throw your body down the pyramid, but you have to be willing to serve. And
I think that's the gift, because it's the trees and the landscape that will be the teachers, not you.
Right.
You're the facilitator, and then the learning happens for whatever people want to learn. Somebody says, the unconditional love of giving without expectation of how that love would be received, sharing just to share. Absolutely. And that's exactly what you're exemplifying, Frank. It's absolutely lovely. What would you say has been your greatest achievement? Or what are you most proud of?
My children.
Uh-huh.
My children, they have their difficulties, but they see them shine, to see them shine, and serving other people has been a blast. I've had so much fun doing things for other people, as well. All the way back from before, before I was involved in Druidry, help, doing things for other people and watching them, and I just totally enjoy that. But starting with my children and then extending that.
And those achievements are so simple and yet very, very profound and genuine.
They're fun.
Well, absolutely. And I think if you're not enjoying life, there's something not quite right. And I think finding joy in the living, as I'm talking with the living people, but in yes, in the living, those who are living as well as those who are gone, but in the living of life. And what are the things that bring you joy? Certainly your redwoods do. What else does it bring you? What brings you joy?
Oh, there's lots of things. The science fiction, the concepts that we might do healing with, and explore and go beyond what we are. My computers, I'm a computer geek and I still enjoy them.
Thanks to computers for here.
Yeah. This technology is marvelous.
Yeah.
I remember seeing forecasting that was like, oh yeah, we're going to do this, but it's going to be really expensive, and it's cost nothing, or not very much of anything. Being with friends in ritual and steadfast and performing and singing badly, or or goofing off. Gary Washington is a friend of mine. Every time we get together, we've gotten together, and he does this Buddhist Smokey the Bear poem thing. It's marvelous. Like, oh, the people in my life.
Okay, that's wonderful.
And by people, I mean the trees too.
Yeah.
The mountains too. The ocean ferns.
Is there anything you would change about your life?
I think that there have been some people who have failed, and I would do a better job with them. Felt like I should have done a better job with them. And there's people I know that tried to get to the point of where we are with understanding spirituality and nature, and for some reason wasn't able to, at the time, we got somewhere, but and maybe I didn't fail them as much as they went a different direction. Yeah.
I think that can be quite disappointing, that sense of regret, and yet people go their own direction. You can only go so far, and then others take on that as well.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge that you've had that you've overcome?
Being depressed.
Okay.
Being I honestly, I haven't, we had fire, and I had prostate cancer, and we had, it's my own mental funk that has times been really difficult to deal with. And I have a good friend. I've known him since the 70s, and his father was a marvelous, delightful man. Doug Gordon was my biology teacher. And I'm talking to Scott, his son. I've known his son since 1971. And he talks about his father having that same thing. His father was very, very, very nature oriented toward nature, and loved it, taught biology, and had these classes. And that to me has been the thing I've dealt with most, and it's resulted in times in anger, but in frustration. So, but the main problem was depression, loneliness, that kind of thing. And it's a lot harder to feel lonely now with trees around.
Absolutely. So this depression was, well, obviously you've always had trees in your life, but somehow that raising your consciousness or your awareness of them, or recognizing them as a medicine or as allies for you in times of challenge, in times of pain, sorrow, depression. Yeah.
And I'm not even sure it's not necessarily even cultural, because my mom used to say all the time, she said, "La vida es para sufrir. Life is to suffer."
Yeah.
And I was like, and I was raised that way, and I'm like, right. And I would tell her, "No, I don't think, Mom." "No, Mama, I don't think that's how it works." But there are things that happen in your life that are painful, and finding branches and roots that you can hang on to, and feel the strength that comes from that, and deal with the pain is what needs to be done. That's what I've had to do.
I heard a description that suffering is pain that you have not learned from.
That's a good one.
And I find that far more reassuring than life is full of suffering, because I know that from the Roman tradition. And of mortification and offering things up, etc., etc. But I do think, I know myself, some of the most profound learnings I've had have come from pain and challenge.
Yeah.
Because I think it helps you tap into resources you didn't know you had, and strength, and you discover a resilience, even within the pain, even while you're feeling pain. And sometimes it doesn't feel like you're strong. It feels you're just in a pit. And that somehow, I think if we're open to it, I think maybe not everybody can do that, but I feel I'm very fortunate that I have been able to look to my pain and find some strength in it. And I don't know, is that something you've been able to do?
That and the humility that comes from, when you're feeling the pain and you feel like you have to control it. This is your pain or somebody else's pain. I can control this. And the humility that comes from going and saying, I will never be as strong as those mountains. I will never be as old as those trees. I will never be as free flowing, as able to carve rock as well as that water.
And that's not your goal. That's the human condition. I think it's really interesting that we can tap into the supports of those great skills, or it's not the skill of water, it's the power of water, I suppose, or the power of the mountains, or the power of the trees, to be able to tap in. And Lisa Horn says, thoughts of suffering and pain can sometimes be worse than the actual original pain. And what is it? This is to paraphrase Shakespeare. There's nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. But I like that notion of, and of course that brings in awe of the power of those mountains, the strength of those trees, the ability of that water to carve those shapes into the rock. That keeps us more aligned with nature and more in harmony with them, when you realize, actually, that's not a dumb tree. Or, that's a dumb piece of rock, or whatever it is, that actually there is an incredible amount of consciousness, intelligence, and magical strength that we can't even tap into. I know there's the book on what is it called? Something green, Brilliant Green. And you were, you could get it on Kindle, an ebook for €1 or something. I can't remember who wrote it. 2 people wrote it, I think. But they're talking about trees, and you mentioned your redwoods are slow. And they talk about trees being very, very slow. Therefore, we don't see them as humans, because compared to trees, we're very, very fast. So that there's an assumption that they're not sentient, so we can cut bits off and all of this kind of stuff. But they do move and they do grow. It's just, it's at such slow pace that we don't see it. A bit like, aliens come down here who are much faster than us. They see us really, and then they start cutting bits off us, because they don't notice that actually we have thoughts, feelings, etc., and sensitivities, and we treat trees like that. And so I'm conscious, being so in awe of trees and being aware of Brilliant Green. That's it. Stefano Mancuso. That's it. Somebody, Diana, mentions how they send nutrients and healing and treatments to other sick trees. They protect their like kind, and it's and then they have all these, what is it? They have 20 senses. We have our 5 senses, or maybe our 6th, if we're lucky, where they can detect, okay, there are metals, I go towards there, or I don't, or I can detect water, or whatever it is. And through the mycelial communications, they can connect with each other. I mean, that's magic.
Yeah. Well, there's one little grove that the Women's Federation Grove that has like the 7th largest. And we were, Muggsy and I, my dog, and Carlos and I were wandering around, and there's supposed to be in there, and I haven't seen it, an albino redwood.
Oh, so it's white.
That that does not, yes, that does not photosynthesize.
Wow.
And it gets its sustenance, or it did, I don't know, I haven't found it yet. It gets its sustenance by being granted it by the other redwoods around it.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that blows me away. This is just from Anne Beer. This is a wonderful conversation affirming how powerful the great trees and mountains can be as agents of healing. Thank you both very much. Healing for us, but just that point that you have that albino tree. So it's the other trees will feed it.
Mm-hmm.
What cooperation, I'm really in awe of that. That is just magic.
They also
when
have
I was,
humor.
hmm?
The trees also have a sense of humor. Sometimes they're sarcastic.
Go on, expand.
I met a sarcastic ghost pine once.
Go on.
I was walking, and this was not in the redwoods. This was in the ecology around Reading, and there was this ghost pine that had been fire. It had been fire damaged. And I was being sympathetic, and it said to me, something like, "Oh, that's so kind of you, human." I went, "My goodness." And like, yes, we're a little snippy this year, aren't we? and he had gone through some suffering, some fires. Fires are actually, that's part why there's so many fires in California. Some of these areas are actual fire-based ecologies.
Yeah.
And they grow and expect the fires to come along and clean out the lower undergrowth. And so I think there's something like this had happened, and he was a little snippy about it. He was, and I had this is Aaron and I, my friend Aaron and I, we were exploring this one grove, and there was a tree there, and it's called the Mother of the Grove, which means it's the biggest or second biggest grove. That's what humans call it, right? And it had a goat pen, and I said, "Oh, I've got to go in." So I was standing in. Aaron's standing outside, and Aaron says, "Okay, well, I want to go in now." So I walked outside, and Aaron walked inside, and this branch hit me on the shoulder, and I was like, and I mean, it was like I was being laughed at. It was like, see, I wasn't going to hit her, but you, on the shoulder, and I went, "Oh, thank you. It was not a big branch."
Oh, get your own back. There
was definitely amusement.
Okay, so you were still welcome in the tree, but
yes,
just
yes, but I had been there too long.
Okay.
I wasn't sharing.
That's wonderful. Nothing like being taught a lesson. That's brilliant. I love it. And you talk about fire-based ecology. I lived in Lesotho in Southern Africa, and fires are necessary to get the protea flower to bloom. It's the same on Mount Kilimanjaro. Flowers bloom with fires, and yet if they're not controlled, there's a problem. But I think I remember when I first went to Africa, which was the early 80s, you could see Kilimanjaro. I mean, I was in Kenya, but if I was further down in Kenya, because Mount Kilimanjaro is on the border of Tanzania and Kenya, you could see lots of snow, and you'd see that stereotypical picture of quite a lot of snow on the top of the mountain. Now, and then when I went to Tanzania, I started going there in the mid-90s, and there was less and less snow at the top. It looked like there was a polar bear of snow on the top. My son used to call it the polar bear. And I suppose the temperature has gone up. So fires, the fires that were necessary became more dangerous because with the less snow, it all has an impact on it. So when you say you have a fire-based ecology there, and then what is it that has them getting out of control? Why is that? And do you have an answer?
Yes. what besides the fact that the temperatures have gone up, people want things nice and neat, so they don't want fires.
Okay.
And I mean, I was on the way to a class with Doug Gordon, my biology teacher, freshman year of high school, and he was talking about how all of these areas that we were going through is the manzanita and the ghost pine and that manzanita, ghost pine, and live oak. Live oak. I can't remember the name of the ecology of the biome, but the fires would come through and clean out. And this was 1971. Fires would come through and clean out the lower growth, which would let them seed, and then would
Yep.
also cause the trees to seed. And he's pointing out and he's saying, look over there. He says, these people are they're making sure they don't have fires. They're preventing the fires. But the undergrowth is starting to choke around there to get too thick. The fires get too hot because there's too much fuel, and manzanita is a beautiful wood. It burns very hot, and when they get too big, and it'll, instead of just burning away things, it'll start the trees on fire. As opposed to causing them to germinate, it'll burn them. There's too much growth, and humans have been, they don't like fires when it gets near their house.
Which is understandable, but so what you're saying is that in an effort to control fires, you're making them worse rather than leaving them to.
Yeah, you're not integrated with the ecology. You're just saying, well, I think that if we stop the fires happening, that would be better for everybody, and it's not.
No.
And,
yeah. Yep. Okay, I have another personal question. I think that might be the last of the personal questions. Well, I have a few, but I won't. I'll be good to you. What's the most reckless thing you've ever done?
Reckless thing I've ever done. Reckless and positive.
Whatever. However you look at it. I got a job, a consulting job in Chile, and I went there with no credit card and $200. And, okay.
And went well, did well. And they didn't arrest me or anything. They wanted $40 when I got there, and I gave them that, and so I had $160 left. And went to work and enjoyed the history. That's another thing that's in I do is history.
That's wonderful, because you wouldn't get into the US with $200 and no credit card.
No, you wouldn't. And Santiago de Chile is very much like if you're in Salt Lake. The mountains there's mountains to the west, and there's mountains to the east, and they talk a lot about skiing, and there's Polynesians.
Okay, that's a very long country.
Yes,
it's wonderful.
Yeah. The mountains are wonderful there.
Your interest in history, is there any historical figure that you admire?
Oh, that I admire?
Or that you're interested in?
Galvez comes to mind. Galvez, his name was Bernardo Galvez. He was a Spaniard who was a captain in Texas, and he became from Texas. He became the governor of Spanish Louisiana. Then he became he was governor of Cuba he's the reason the Revolutionary War, American Revolutionary War that everybody talks about. Yeah, he beat the British several times. He was not, an English colonist, but he was his own man, and he was, of course, in support of the goals of Spain. Eventually, he became the viceroy of Spain. He was a man who was very much admired by the American founding fathers. They would toast him every year at their after the end of the Revolution. He became the viceroy. If he had stayed alive, he probably would have been something like a Washington. But it seems he may have been poisoned. And he loved where he was. He loved Texas. When he was a captain there, I've been to Texas, and he had more affection for it than I do. But he loved the New World as a Spaniard, and his family was heavily involved in things, and he was quite an amazing man.
So he came as a modern from
1770s. He was.
Okay.
Yeah, this was back in the historical. He was a modern Spaniard. Yeah, an Enlightenment Spaniard.
Oh, okay. And how was he in terms of local people? I'm talking about local native people.
He was pretty good. He was pretty good. He was, there. When you look at history, they didn't have the opportunity to understand things that we understand, and some of them didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I have relatives who are that way, even now. But you look back at it on a historical perspective, and how they treated natives, how they treated the indigenous people, how they treated indigenous people in Wales, for instance. That's just awful. It's just awful. And I don't take the excuse of blaming them, rather so that I don't have to think about, somehow I'm better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's wow, that's awful. I don't know if they knew better. Some of them said they knew better. But my own actions are what's important.
I think that is a very important thing that you say. Somebody says, instead of putting up a magnifying glass to somebody, put up a mirror. That it's very easy to look at those people and what they have done when we ourselves have not been in that situation. And given the circumstances in which you're born, does that determine how you are?
Yeah.
And then with exposure to various experiences or to different worldviews, then you have an opportunity to change your previously held values or beliefs. But if you've never been exposed to something different, then you are, I suppose, a victim of your upbringing, or a product of your upbringing, rather than a victim.
Yeah. I've never starved. I've never, I've never gone through a serious illness other than prostate cancer and COVID, which are serious, but they're not the plague or Spanish influenza or things. I've never been in a war. My uncle was in Vietnam, but I've never been in war.
Yeah.
So I don't have those things pressing on me.
Yeah. For which to be eternally grateful for, because even in this time, I think gratitude is really important for, well, I know how fortunate I am, and there aren't bombs dropping on my house. They're still happening in other parts of the world. And
it shouldn't, but it is.
Yeah. And
that we can judge. That we can say, no, that's not proper behavior.
Yeah. Speaking of proper or improper behavior, or not proper behavior, if you could speak about one concern you have about about the modern world, a concern that you have.
We don't seem to have the memory that we need. We don't seem to have the memory of where we're from, where we, what we've gone through, what others have gone through. The recent political mess in my country.
Yeah.
There would certainly be a lot fewer people in the 1940s faced with the fascism and stuff like that who would be saying, "Oh, maybe that's a good idea," and that humans, we don't tend to, we try to we teach our young ones by books, which is not an adequate way of teaching them, or by lecturing them, and we don't seem to transmit the important things.
For you, what's a good way of teaching?
Experiences.
Yeah.
Experiences, so they can see and feel. It's a lot harder to go up to a tree and decide you're going to stick your knife in it, as because I used to be a Boy Scout leader. If you can understand that those trees are beautiful, that they're fun to hang in, they're they you can climb them and you can be with them. It's a lot harder to carve your initials in them. Yeah, more exposure by kids to by young men to they will be more of them that get their initials carved in them. But that experience means that they have the opportunity to feel something as opposed to know something.
There's also something around, you're saying too much emphasis on books, or even maybe, I don't know if you're suggesting dogma, that when we're taught in a dogmatic way, we suspend our ability, not even suspended, we may not even develop our ability to think critically. And when you think of what's gone on in your country, when you see evidence of, and I also see it on social media, and it's nothing to do with the US, but people suspend their ability to think critically and get stuck in one position or another without actually giving consideration and allowing for nuances. I think is a worrying thing.
Yeah, that's I had an interesting experience with that one time, actually. I was talking to a gentleman, and he was an avowed atheist. There is no spirituality. There's just this. And I said to him, he says, "What? But I believe in science." As you dogmatically said.
Yeah, I believe.
And I said, "Oh, so you use the scientific method to find out things?" And he went, "What?" And I went, no. Scientific method, thesis, experiment, conclusion, rethesis. And he went, and I was like, "Didn't you ever experience like science? not read it, not have it told you, experienced it?" I was like, "Oh dear."
And that is so important. And the Druids of old were scientists because they engaged with their experience, they questioned it, they reflected on it, and knew from experience. And as a psychologist, we were always talking about the scientific method and be empirical, etc., etc. And psychology in Ireland can be quite conservative. But as a counseling psychologist, and psychotherapy just goes at the softer end. And when you work with clients, you may have been exposed to the scientific method, and you're meant to be a scientist, practitioner, etc. And then you discover, actually, there's lots that go on in people's lives that we cannot account for, that haven't been measured, like love, for example. But it's around your ability to reflect on it. And empiricism refers to, it has two meanings. One is, doing your randomized double-blind control trials, like we say you do with drug trials. And then the other one is long-lived experience. So the use of turmeric in India, for example, as an anti-inflammatory, and all the other things, the magical things that turmeric does. It's going on for thousands and thousands of years. A number of years ago, some pharmaceutical company wanted to patent it. And luckily, the Indian government said, no, you can't. This has been used by us for thousands and thousands. We all know that turmeric is used for blah, 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 blah. And okay, they haven't done the randomized control trials. They don't need to, because every Indian, that's a gross exaggeration, but when you think of what your mother used, or your grandmother used in Mexico to treat diarrhea or whatever it is, they haven't done the research, but going back generations and generations, they all know if you take this herb in this particular way, it'll treat this particular condition. That's empiricism.
Yes, it is.
And it's like, if I use herbs and I take something, and if it doesn't work, then I don't take it again. And if it does work, and I don't know if it hasn't been tested, I've had colleagues say, it's not valid if it hasn't been tested. I said, well, I'm a single case study here. I was sick, and then I took the treatment and it worked. What my husband Howard used to do, he used to do these ABA designs. He'd take a baseline. Okay, these are my symptoms. Then I'll take whatever it is. Oh, I see an improvement. Now I'll stop taking it. And if it goes back to being unwell again, and then I take it again and it works. Okay, that convinces me that this is what I need to take for this thing. And critically, well, the scientists say this pill works and I'm going to continue taking it, even though it is having no effect on me. And it's that thing, I know with the pandemic, here the narrative as well, we have to listen to the science, we have to listen to the science and listen to the science. Fair enough, except last March there was no science because it was all new. Right.
There wasn't enough statistical data.
There wasn't enough
to do anything. So
no.
Well.
Yeah. So it's around, somebody says, I've always taught my son to cause and effect. If you do this thing now, you won't have to interrupt playing with friends. But if you choose to do that task later, you'll have to stop playing to work. Give the kids choices and explain the cause and effect. They learn to think for themselves. And it empowers the kids to learn to make decisions for themselves. Sandy, I absolutely agree with you. I remember this is changing my son's nappy, who never liked his nappy changed, regardless of its contents, excuse me. And I remember saying to somebody, well, I always believe in giving him a choice. And someone says, you cannot give a 2-year-old a choice. And I said, I do. He has a choice. He can get his nappy changed on the floor or on the couch. Still getting it done. So that notion around giving people choice. And then Lisa says, the plant people, indigenous elders have said, we've lost that knowledge. Every other commercial in the States is for pharmaceuticals. Yeah, but I know, you've got well-known herbalists in the US have written books. You've got, what do you call her? Gladstar? Rosemary Gladstar. You have Susan Weed, and I'm sure there's others. David. His name is gone. I've met him. Winston. There are lots of American herbalists who are actually gathering herbs, writing about it, that don't lose it, don't give up. It's there. It's around tapping into it. That's right. Thank you, Stephanie. You said Rosemary. My herbal teacher was an American woman of Irish-Scottish origin who now lives in Ireland and is a Druid. So she worked in Eugene, actually, as a herbalist. So Gina McGarry. So it's still there. It's not completely lost. It's about finding it. And I think, when you're ready for it, you will find it. What did they say? When the pupil is When the pupil is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
And it's like those synchronous meetings that you had with your friend taking you to ECG, and then you meet Dave and Kerry and Rosemary and all of that. So you're ready for it, and then it happens. Yeah. So, okay, that was your concern. So what is your hope for the modern world?
I hope that, my hope is that we will become integrated enough to reach a point where we care enough about each other to care for the people, and by people I mean, like the dogs and the trees and
Yes.
around us, so that we can be integrated with them, so that we can share with them, so that we can care about them. It's not a, it's kind of like, science fiction again, the Star Trek, before the latest Star Treks, where the Federation on Earth is pretty together. They're pretty together. They have things together, and now they have other things to do. And I think we have other things to do. I think maybe we have a chance to maybe, if we can, live through our own stupidity, which I think we can.
Yeah.
We can represent this world and see if we can get to others without messing them up. I've loved space since I was 2 years old, going into space. And so my mother she did that to me. And I think that my hope is that we can integrate ourselves well enough and not exclude people who have weird ideas. And I don't mean but integrate enough so that we can say, okay, let's look beyond what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look beyond what we're doing now and how we can do that. How we can, if not get to the stars because of whatever, we can at least look to the stars. I'd like to go to the stars, but look to the stars. The next time we embark on a galleon to the new world, whatever that new world is, when we get there, maybe this time we won't kill whatever it is that it lives there off. Maybe we'll be able to say, oh, wow, that's amazing. We are not going to presume that we know more than you, and by that I mean, even just the land. And we're going to be respectful, and that would be wonderful.
Somebody's just said Mars landing was a few minutes ago. I watched Perseverance touch down as you spoke. This is Vivian Wormwood, who's multitasking. I take it you're serious. Vivian, I'm saying Mars. I was calling you Mars. I was just... we have the Laura Gowalla, the Book of Invasions, and talks about the history of the peoples who came. And it was believed, that the Celts came in 600-700 BC, and then all Irish people and Scots people and Welsh people are of, Celtic origin. And actually, there are no genetic markers for Celts. In fact, the Celts didn't invade Ireland; they came. And that, Irish people who are Irish living in Ireland are Neolithic Irish people, and that there's often that assumption that people came and then they wiped out their predecessors, when now they're discovering with all this these DNA markers that actually finding no, there was a lot of integration. And I think that's really, really interesting. So it's when you talk about reaching for the stars, of that it's about not replacing, but integrating with, or going there with permission. Vivian says they did an absolutely fascinating graphic and took a couple of high-res photographs. Check out after this. All right.
Yeah, they have to.
But there's always a fear, that the way we are is, people who are empirical like to build empires or take over, etc. So that can be a challenge. So just something I'd like to ask you, is there anything you would not compromise on? Something for you that, or a value that's not negotiable?
I don't want this taken, but respect for living things. It's very, very difficult. It's very something I wouldn't want to negotiate on. And that's not, and respect meaning sometimes things die. I mean, by definition, it's not life is more important than anything else, because it isn't. But that respect is not something that I ever want to ever negotiate on again.
And what do you mean by respect?
There's a scene in a movie. What's the name of that? It's a movie. I can't remember it. There's a scene where it's in the 1700s. These men are hunting a deer, right? And they're hunting a deer at the beginning of the movie. It's marvelous movie. And this gentleman who is genetically white was raised by this Native American man, and his brother is Native American, and they're chasing this deer, and they shoot it, right, because they're hunting. And the father of them both, the two younger men, he goes over and he thanks it for its sacrifice, and he blesses it, and not just blesses it, but he asks for its blessing, asks for its permission. He didn't ask for its permission before he shot it, but he did afterwards, and we said, and we do that in my family. We thank, very much grateful, and with my friends have taught me that to thank not just creation or the creator, but also the individual contributors to my meal or our meal or our thing. So we'll thank the potatoes.
Well, it's if we, The Last of the Mohicans, I thought that was Gail Nyoka.
Yes, Last of the Mohicans.
I watched that again a few months ago, and I cried my eyes out. It was absolutely beautiful. And now that's what I thought it was, and I wasn't too sure. But if we regard ourselves as druids, as being part of this web of life, and that in order for species to survive, it means some others have to die. We plant. I mean, sometimes say, well, you shouldn't eat meat because you're killing animals. But it's like, well, do plants have less value than animals? That there are parasites and bugs and all sorts of things eating us, and we're living with a rogue virus at the moment that is taking people's lives. But I think it's recognizing that the sacrifice that some plant or animal has made,
the respect for that, yes,
that I can live, knowing that I too will be sacrificed.
Yes.
When my time comes, or I have things eating me already, and they're not taking too much of me. So it's a bit like, you know, harvesting
a little more of me, I
tree
think.
or picking a few fruits and leaving enough to continue
Yeah.
growing. But that's the way it is. And it's always with, I'm eating well because of someone has given their life, or something has given their life so that I can eat, and to be so grateful for that. And
it's, you know, I mean, it goes back to when my daughters would, you know, when they were the older ones, we'd love a rabbit fur or a coat or something like that, and I'd say, well, are you willing to eat it? You know, we're not going to waste it, so are you willing to eat it? Oh.
And I think that's really important, that if you are, that, you know, how much of the animal or the plant, you know, when, you know, you buy a head of broccoli, and how much, I eat everything. I just take the outer skin off, but I will eat the stalk. A lot of people just throw that away. It's so eating as much of the plant as you can, rather than throwing it. Otherwise,
or finding a way to use that part that's spare, so that it goes back in the ground. It's used. You know, yes, recycling. They talk about recycling doesn't have that big an effect, but it does personally. You know?
Absolutely.
It changes what you're thinking inside, and you start saying, well, you know, this I need to set aside for this purpose, and this I need to set aside for this purpose, and no, I don't have to eat that. I can feed that to something else.
Lisa Horn says, yes, you can make stock. Absolutely. So, I mean, stock, or if you have a chicken, for example, you can't make a coat out of the out of the chicken skin, but and generally you buy your chickens plucked. But yes, it's around who else can share of this. I remember being brought up as a child, you know, think of all the poor people in the world who are starving, so you must finish your plate. In one way, good, but I also kept eating even though I was full, which I still have a difficulty to leave food on a plate because of my thinking. But when I lived in Africa, I lived in a desert in the north of Kenya, and myself and my best friend, they were working as primary healthcare nurses in a desert, and we had a rubbish box. So tin cans, everything went into this rubbish box. And I know there was a pit near our house. I never saw it, because every time I go with the box to empty, to take it there, some child would intercept me, take the box, and they would make cups out of the tin cans. Everything was reused.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I know if you're going into a village, these were the Turkana were they were nomadic pastoralists, but had been left destitute after a bad famine. So they were in these, I suppose, temporary villages, and we would go around doing our primary health care. But you'd see them with cups that were made out of margarine cans or bean cans, mm-hmm. and they would finish them off beautifully. They would have put a handle on them, and that all the edges were smooth, so the can didn't cut you, and that they did that. You know, it's just fascinating. Claire Gaynard, you can grow veg out of the end scraps, radish and carrots especially. Absolutely. So it's one, I get a kick out of being able to not to have to waste things, you know, to be able to use things. It's I haven't made needles out of bones yet or anything like that, but I used to I was gathering for a number of years salmon skin and curing it and making little pouches. And I remember we had one of our OBOD retreats was around the story of Finn McCool, Salmon of Knowledge. So I had for a year gathered at the local market salmon skins, and I cured them and then cut them out, and everybody made their own little wisdom purse. You know,
that's really cool.
It was it's quite high working with trying to cure animal skins or fish skins. But anyway, that's a story for another time. But it's just lovely to be able to, so otherwise they'd have gone, you know,
right,
wherever. But it was nice to be able to use them. So it's nice to be able to do this. Are you a pacifist?
A lot more than I used to be.
So would you fight back? Or is there a time?
I believe that if you fight back immediately, you probably deserve what you get. And if after a while, it's things are happening that's really bad, you may have to. But if
Mhm.
you can get beyond that somehow, that maybe you can make a difference in the person's, maybe not their children's life, maybe not their lives, but their children's lives, or your own children's lives, or the people after you. Um, so I'm not, it's I'm not a pacifist per se. Everything is in the uh, roll over and play dead. But I do think that there's a learning that can happen there.
So you're a conditional pacifist, mostly, yes. And
And if I can get away, and if I can come, if I can live, I continue to live in the situation, you know, yeah, I'll do it.
wonderful. So, my final question: what is your favorite season or festival? Either
Yeah, my favorite festival. My favorite festival is Samhain.
most people say that. So tell me about that.
Um, well, ever since I was a kid, Halloween. My birthday is the 21st. Halloween, 31st. I didn't realize there was a cultural thing because growing up, there's a cultural thing in Mesoamerican and Mexican and society, but Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
Because my mother didn't do it because she was very Catholic, and she wasn't going to do that. But my grandmother for Christmas would make these little altars and things and animals and put them all together, and I realized that was basically her ofrenda. And Samhain is a time when I can feel how close how close they are, how close the ones who've gone beyond are.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that. I enjoy the silliness and the seriousness. So solid, easy.
Wonderful. Well, you've been an absolutely wonderful guest.
Thank you for inviting me.
Most enjoyable. There've been lovely comments. Thank you both very much. Blessings and everyone. There are thank you, Eimear and Francisco, a most interesting and enlightening fireside chat. So we will look at your comments, and they're both on YouTube and on Facebook. So thank you. You've been an absolutely amazing guest, Frank. I mean, I only met you once, and that was in New Orleans, and I thought you were a very interesting person.
A lot of fun to meet you too. That was very, and that's I think in many ways my daughter had, through the influence of GCG and your presence, my middle daughter has become, OBOD member, has become interested in this, and with other people's influence, of course. That has a big effect on her, and then it's starting to radiate out into other daughters.
Wonderful, and hopefully we will get to meet again in person. However, whenever that will be, it seems like I'm not even thinking about physical meetings. It seems so far away, and then I'll be pleasantly surprised when it happens sooner than expected. Yeah. You've been an absolute delight, Frank, and I'm just going to turn you off, but don't go away, and I'll just say goodbye to everybody else. So listen, thank you so much for joining us for which I imagine you thought was a fascinating chat. I really, really enjoyed speaking to Frank, and lovely as always, reading your comments and feeling that you're part of this conversation as well. So, and I know I didn't get to comment on all or acknowledge all of your comments because they come so fast, but they're very, very much appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you next week for another fireside chat with another, as no doubt, another amazing member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So, Gunari Liv, Slán Gafoil, and see you next week. Bye-bye.